Greetings, 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 grand rising, grand rising. While go on, while go on. This is your brother Chief with another video. Let me make sure I have audio on Facebook. Give me 1 second, please. Hold up for 1 second. Greetings, grand rising, grand rising. While go on. All right, so we got audio. What are we going to do now? We're going to get into a little more reading from the book GENE-IN-SIS to Reevaluation, Book 1. Okay, Book 1 has 3 parts. So we are actually on part 1 in or of Book 1. So like I said, grand rising to each and every one of you. I mean, some of you may be at work, school, whatever you're doing. I'm wishing you an amazing 24. First off, I'd just like to acknowledge and thank all the ancestors, man, for their love, their guidance and protection. And they're just waiting for us to activate. That's it. You know what I mean? Always remember this. We are living in a free-willed environment, earth, realm, whatever you want to call it, right? And nothing or no one could intercede, without our permission. You know what I mean? So we definitely have to constantly reach out to our ancestors and, give them the permission to intervene on our behalfs. You know what I mean? Or on our behalf, rather. So let us get into this. Like I said, we're gonna do some more reading. Get into the comments. Let me know where you are tuning in from, whatever part of the country, the world you are in. Let me know so I could give you a shout out. All right. So let's get into this. Let's get into reading. And the book we're reading from is GENE-IN-SIS to Reevaluation. This is book 1. Book 1 has 3 parts. We are currently reading still in part 1 of book 1. Okay, and the link for the book is in the description. You definitely want to get a copy of that. I'm telling you, man, this is like really literally one of the best books you'll have in your library. Okay, so let's get into this. Let me see where we at. Now you might hear like a little humming. It's coming from next door. They have one of the blowers. The neighbor is blowing out, dead leaves from his yard. So I'm hearing a little feedback from that. But let's ignore that. All right. Let's make an attempt to just focus on the information. All right, here we go. So in part 1 of reading, from the book GENE-IN-SIS to Reevaluation, we kind of like went from the beginning. We taking things from the beginning in regards to America being the firstborn, the continents, of the continents. We also covered, the Americas, being the first Egypt, and of course, while reading and studying that, we also learned that the first pyramids, that were created or built in Africa, it was as a gift from our people to them, because there was a drought, within parts of the Americas, particularly South America, and we had to get food, from Africa to sustain while the drought, we were going through that farming, right? It was a farming, not a drought. Okay. So we give them the Khufu, the pyramid of Khufu, as a gift. We also brought cotton and the whole concept of clothing into Africa. You feel me? And the wheel, the loom, all those different things, we took that into Africa. So based on popular belief or what's being taught, that civilization came from other parts of the world, that is incorrect. We took civilization into different parts of the world. All right, so we're gonna proceed from or continue from page 16 of GENE-IN-SIS to Reevaluation, book 1, part 1. That's where we are at, and we are gonna get into prehistoric man, the human race, and its dispositions. All right. Now, the article "Prehistoric Battle," which appeared in April last, has called out many letters of inquiry. Time would not allow individual answers, so this attempt may suffice for all inquiries up to date. During the past 10 years, many phases of this column of the journal, but in order to bring the facts before the minds of the readers, they must they may more fully appreciate the subject, it will be necessary to use some of the data that have appeared during the past years. The exact time, place of man's first appearance on the earth will probably never be a certainty. So far as known, no recognized authority has ever attempted to give us any light on this part of the subject. Individual writers frequently arrange a few isolated facts or supposed facts into a sequence for the sole purpose of providing this or that theory. 9/10 of them have assumed that man originated in southern or southwestern Asia. There is absolutely nothing to prove the assumption. It is much more probable that man originated in the present North Frigid zone. The earth first cooled within this zone. Within it are found the remains of tropical plants and animals. The elephant, rhinoceros, and many other tropical animals were once abundant in Siberia, Lapland, and Alaska. One thing is certain: man retreated from the north as the ice of the glacial epoch gradually moved towards the south. It is not necessary to go more than 14 miles of Kansas City to prove this. In a bed of glacial drift near Courtney in this country Jackson are relics that show the handwork of man. These relics are not abundant, but several have been found near the middle of the deposit. Among these may be mentioned a rude, unpolished shirt or so-called flint pipe. If you were to find a mound of each and also find an old shoe or a fragment of pottery within or under it, you would be forced to conclude that man existed before this mound was built. Here are relics of a man within it. Now, this is what we are forced to conclude with regard to many of the glacial deposits found throughout the north half of the northern hemisphere. In the vicinity of Kansas City are numerous glacier deposit, particularly sand and gravel. What are the proofs that they are truly glacial? These contain granite, syenite, quartzite, and many other mountain rocks that do not occur in Kansas City, nor within hundreds of miles of it. Nearly every deposit enriched in free gold, all right, enriched in free gold in Kansas City. But the gold has been treated so fine from its long journey that it is not practicable to mine that gold. The deposit mentioned above 14 miles east of the city yields from about $1.50 to $2 per cubic yard. Some of the glacial deposits of Howard County, 70 miles east of the here, yield twice as much gold. During Governor Woodson's administration in the 1870s, our legislature appropriated $5,000, which the Geological Survey used in testing these deposits for gold. Again, these deposits contain an occasional piece of calamite, the famous Indian pipe stone, which is found at only one place in the world, and that is several hundred miles north of Kansas City. In fact, there is sample of proof that these deposits are of glacial origin and that man existed before these deposits were made and consequently before the glacial epoch. When was the glacial epoch? The southern hemisphere is now going through a glacial epoch. There have been many such epochs. They alternate between the northern and the southern hemispheres. The precision of the equinoxes from one year to the next is such that one portion of the earth, either in the extreme north or south, is generally turned away from the sun and becomes glaciated. This precision causes a cycle in 28,600 years and a grand cycle in from 286,000 to 411,000 years. During one of these grand cycles, there will be a glacial epoch or ice period in each hemisphere around its polar region and extending from one half to one third of the distance from its pole to the equator. The deposits near Kansas City were no doubt made during the last glacial epoch in the northern hemisphere, according to the calculations of the astronomers, and they do not differ much. The last glacial epoch in this part of the world commenced, about 241,000 years ago and ended about 81,000 years ago. Man has lived then in the locality not less than 1/4,250,000 years ago. All right. So we are going back and giving proof, all right, that even the earliest remains or the earliest man, all right, was found here in the Americas. In Switzerland and some of the parts of Europe, he has lived equally as long. I have estimated thousands of rude flint or shet knives collected in Europe, Australia, and throughout the United States. Strange to say, they show 8 to 10 characteristics in common. My friend, Mr. T.J. Tidswell of Independence, M.O., Missouri, discovered most of these similarities. I have added 2 or 3 since he first called my attention to them 9 years ago. This discovery and scores of others that might be correlated with it, proving the unity of the human race. Under similar conditions, man has produced similar results from Siberia to Patagonia and from Australia to Alaska. After correlating all the data that have been made public to the present time, the conclusion is unavoidable that the oldest civilization was in Yucatan and Central America. Now, like I said before, Central America is a new concept. So we're just going to say the Americas, period. All right. But the oldest civilization on Earth was in the Americas. Future discoveries may change this conclusion. It seems that Egypt was first peopled by immigrants from the Yucatan. Space will allow only a few facts that clearly indicate the truth of this assertion. Now, when we are talking about Egypt, they're talking about the Kemet in Africa. And once again, we are proven with facts, all right, which we did last night from oral history, that the pyramids, all that was a gift to Africa from South Americans. Now we are giving more evidence that the immigrants, again, that brought the pyramids, the concept of pyramids into what is now called Egypt in Africa, came from the Yucatan. It came from the Americas. All right. First, the pyramids of Yucatan are some of them much larger than any found in what they now call the current Egypt. That of the Cheops, not accepted. Second, the pyramids of Egypt bear structural evidence of having been modeled on those of the Yucatan, notably the one at Coloma, which covers 23 acres. Third, the early Egyptians and the Mayas of the Yucatan had the same system of reckoning time, but the Mayas developed a system that was far superior and which antedates that of the current Egypt. Fourth, the Mayas manufactured a cement that was of the same material as that of all ancient Egypt. Fifth, the architecture of the Yucatan is of the same general type as that of the ancient Egypt, but it is finer and seems to have been the model that the Egyptians attempted to imitate. All right. The original could never be duplicated. You feel me? Let's keep that in mind. 6, the art of both countries as displayed their ceramics and architecture is one of the same type or school, that of the Yucatan being more highly developed. Other facts could be easily given, but let these for the present suffice. As the race dispersed from Yucatan, many are lost, and finally civilization became practically a thing of the past. The Mayas being sun worshippers, as were nearly or quite all of most of ancient races, such as the attention was given to astronomy. All right. So all the concept of religion came from the sun worship. All right. We can remember we are sun people. And we took that civilization, that culture, we took it all over the world. This science was highly developed. They left a splendid literature, most of which was destroyed by the Spaniards at the time of the and immediately after the conquest of 1510 to 1521. And of course, that's what colonizers do. They would destroy, okay, evidence of an earlier civilization, their technology, their civilization, their culture, all right, and even take some of the artifacts and keep it in their possession, their museums, their hidden basements, and all that, and then replace the original people, their culture, the identity of these people with something new. And of course, those are just spoils of war, and that's expected, all right? But when you truly know, you know. But much remains today from the survival. We learned that these ancient people, based on their historical epoch, on astronomical phenomena, a certain thing occurred so many days before or after a total eclipse of the sun, which was on a given day, year, and hour. Astronomers of today can calculate these eclipses and verify this historical data. So we are not just talking about opinions. We are not just talking about beliefs. We are not talking about perceptions. We're talking about well-studied, okay, information from whether it's a geological perspective, archaeological perspective, astronomical perspective. Everything is leading back to the Americas being the original land that came out of the waters. She was the firstborn, and then civilization came from the Americas. Okay, and this is well being laid out in the book GENE-IN-SIS to Reevaluation. And like I said, we are reading from book 1, part 1 of book 1, and book 1 has 3 parts. Okay, they say that these eclipses occurred on the days and hours mentioned, and they were visible in the Yucatan. Now there is a connected written history of the country that reaches back about 9,700 years. Behind this are many interesting traditions and the same glimpse of a splendid mythology. According to one of these traditions, a portion of the Mayas, about 40,000 years ago, rebelled against the ruling king and finally withdrew to the north. Now, this begs the question, if this happened 40,000 years ago, how could a current people that claim to be the original people talk about, well, they're the first one in the Americas and they only came 10, 13,000 years ago? So you see, we are poking holes with proof in all this fallacy that's being told. And that's why I tell my people, we don't have to debate anybody to prove we are the original people. They know. All we have to do is step up, okay, and watch the doors open. And of course, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Nothing in life is easy. However, it's plausible. And however, we will be victorious because it's our time to step up. But not just anybody could step up and take that role, because you have to be righteous in heart. All right, because what we are doing is for the betterment of humanity. It is not individualized. It's not just for us original Americans. It's for the entire world, because we have given the world civilization. We breathed the world into being, so to speak. Okay? So to restore balance and order, the people in power have to be moral. They have to be righteous. It cannot be any other way. All right. The branch seems to have passed along the coast of the Gulf of Mexico and to have reached Louisiana and the lower Mississippi Valley between 30,000 and 35,000 years ago. All right. And it still begs the question. Now we are moving from the South America right up into the United States, Louisiana, lower Mississippi, and all that. Literally over 35,000 years ago. So who's claiming to be the original people that came here for the first time about 10, 12,000 years ago? And of course, even that is a lie. A few years ago, some caissons were sunk for bridge piers on Bayou La Fourche, Louisiana, at a deep of about 62 feet. Some graves were uncovered. They had been made on the sandy beach of the Gulf of Mexico and had been covered with oyster shells. All right, we are talking about facts, actual facts that was time stamped, okay, carbon dated. You feel me? Given that those factual information. The present coast is about 110 miles from that point. The average thickness of the freshwater mud so far as surveyed is less than 40 feet from this point to the Gulf Coast. Taking the advantage amount of solid matter, mud, that has been annually passed down the Mississippi River to form this delta and Gulf plain, and we have a measuring unit. United States government observation made daily since 1872, all right, if I remember correctly, gives the annual amount at about 57,872,000 cubic yards per year. So the United States been tracking that information. So trust and know they know the truth. Okay? We are the ones, or the majority of us are the ones that's lost in the source, not knowing that we are the original people. But it's well documented. By this unit, these graves are at least 29,000 years old. From the lower Mississippi, these people spread over much of the central portions of the North American continent, especially throughout the valleys of Ohio and Mississippi and the lake region. They seem to have been the original mound builders. All right. Many thousands of years after they left the Yucatan, there were another great influx of people from Yucatan that passed north through the center of the continent. From these last descended the so-called Toltecs, Aztecs, and other modern successors, the Pueblos, the Zunis, the Mosquis, etc. This last wave rose on towards the north until it met the reflux wave from the mound builder settlement further north, and then a terrible war was waged. At some future time, perhaps I shall discuss this war and the evidence of it still in existence. I hope to be able to call attention to many of the achievements of the ancient Aztecs and their contemporaries who constituted the principal element in the wave of emigration mentioned above. For many of the facts pertaining to the Mayas of the Yucatan, I am indebted to the Plungon, who had lived and observed in that country most of the time since 1874. The facts are, there is literature and sciences that have left the evidence in North America that are more ancient and more worthy of careful study than any of the afforded by either ancient Greece or Rome. The time will come when a classical education will include the study. The late discoveries of the clay tablets under the foundations of Nineveh prove that in our study of history, we have commenced a long way from the beginning. These tablets are in the possession, if I remember correctly, of the University of Pennsylvania. So like I said before, they have all the documents and all the facts to show and prove that America is the firstborn and we are the original people of the earth, period. Okay? They give dates that reach back between 9,000 to 10,000 years ago. Hundreds of these tablets were found and brought into America at the beginning of the current year. And the source is laid out. Okay? And of course, you get the notes. And in the book, you have a space for your own notes. You did. Now, let us get into an inquiry into the distinctive characteristics of the Aboriginal race of the Americas. That's what we're going to get into, okay? And we're going to read for about an hour, and we're going to take a break, and then we'll do a part 3, and so forth and so forth and so forth. Okay. Physical characteristics. It is an adage among the travelers that he who has seen one tribe of Indians has seen all. so much that the individuals of this race resemble each other, notwithstanding their immense geographical distribution and those differences of climate which embrace the extremes of heat and cold. So essentially, it doesn't matter where you go in the Americas, we have the same phenotype, okay? Regardless of complexion, we have the same phenotype. Facts. All right. What day was that? I think it was yesterday or day before yesterday. My mom, like I said, my people's, they're hardcore Christians, right? And my mom was looking at an artist called Joseph Niles from Barbados, and he was a popular, gospel singer back in the days, right? And she was looking at some of his concerts, his live concerts, and I'm looking at the people in the crowd, and I'm literally seeing the same people, all right, that if you go back in the 60s and 70s here in the United States, the way they dressed, the way they sang, the way they danced to the gospel music. Nope, I mean, if anybody would just ask you and you didn't know, you would think it was actually a church group in the United States. Okay? It's unwavering. I'm telling you, the similarities of the physical attributes of us American Indians. Okay, now you'll go into Africa and you'll see all these different phenotypes on this one landmass. They look different in some ways, but yet still they are all Africans. But when you come into the Americas, the phenotype is typically the same regardless of complexions. Okay, from red bone to the darkest one, the copper colored races, we all look alike. All right. Let us proceed from the heat to the cold. All the tribes possess alike the long, lank black hair, the brown or cinnamon colored skin, the heavy brow, the dull and the sleepy eye, the full and compressed lips, and the salient. Okay, for those of you who don't know what salient means, the definition is also in the book. Most noticeable or important, but dilated, which is an enlarging or widened nose. Okay, so don't let anybody fool you thinking that, your wide nose or your thick lips, another word for wide is salient or dilated. You know what I'm saying? It means that you are African, that only African could produce people who look like that. No, okay? That is an American trait. You feel me? The skin is brown, cinnamon in color. That is us, which is synonymous with the red Indians, which is synonymous with the copper-colored races. It cannot be questioned that physical diversities do occur, equally singular and inexplicable, as seen in different shades of color, varying from fair tint to complexion almost black. Okay, so like I said, from the red bone to an almost black complexion. All right, whether you want to say black or not, we are not black. It's just, again, the hue of the complexion is almost black, or at least you might think that, right? And this too, under circumstances in which climate can have little or no influences. These facts, however, are mere exceptions to the general rule and do not alter the peculiar physiognomy of the Indian. The physiognomy is the facial features, all right, which is an undividedly characteristics as that of what? The Negro. For whether we are him or whether we see him in the athletic Sharib, which is the Carib, or the stunned Shama in the dark Californians, or the fair Borea. He is an Indian still and cannot be mistaken for being of any other race. Okay? The American Indian is typically, okay, what they would call a Negro, but we are not Negro. They're Negro characteristics, but we are not Negro. Negro, the term Negro was given to us. Okay, but the Americans, original American, once again, are cousins to the Negroes, the original Negroes. And that's why all these terms and identities was given to us. Black, Negro, colored, African American, Afro American, the N word, all these different identities, taking us away from who we truly are. Simple American. Really that simple. Okay? Thus, it is that the American Indian, from the southern extremity of the continent to the northern limit of his range, is the same exterior man, with somewhat variable stature and complexion. His distinctive features, though variously modified, are never affected, and he stands isolated from the rest of what? Mankind, identified at a glance in every locality and under every variety of circumstances, and even his desiccated remains, which have withstood the destroying hand of time, preserve the primeval type of his race, excepting only when art has interposed to prevent it. So basically, all right, it doesn't matter what they do. They cannot take away the characteristics of the original American. The only time it's affected or it's impaired is only when art, okay, they use art to interpose or to preserve it, because they start changing it. It becomes whitewashed. They change the thick lips and the wide nose, the salient or dilated nose. Okay? The brown skin, the copper skin. Classification of human species. The following classification is a slight modification of that published in Crania America. The races correspond with those in proof. Bloombuch system, which later differs but little from that of Buffoon. The subdivision into the families is based upon ethnographic analogies, both physical and physiological. One, and we're talking about the different races of men, right? One, Caucasian race. A, Japhetic or Indo-European branch one. That is of the Pelasgic or Caucasian family two. The Germanic family and the Celtic family, the Indonestic family, basically Indonesia, all right? So that's the Caucasian race. Then you have the Semitic or the Syro-Arabian branch, the Arabian family, the Hebrew family Jews. And of course, we're talking about the original people, all right? Then we have the Hamitic or the Libyan branch, the Neolithic or Egyptian family, and then we have the Libyan family. Then we have the Mongolian race, the Mongolian Tatar family, the Turkish family, the Chinese family, the Indo-Chinese family, the Polar family. Then we are talking about the classification of the human race. Then we have the Malay race, the Malay family, the Polynesian family. Then we have the American race. All right. The American family, the Toltecan family, the Negro race. As you could see, we are not Negro. There's a Negro race and there's the American race. All right. We have the Negro race and we have the American race. Give me 1 second, please. Next. So as you can see, the Negro race differs from the American race. The Negro family, all right, the Caffredian family, the Austral-African or Hottentot family, the Oceanic Negro family, the Australian family, the Turks, are mixed family of Caucasian and Mongolian races, in which latter preponderates, the Indo-Chinese nations may yet prove to belong to Malay race, called the Ethiopian race by Professor Blumenbach. So as we could see the classification of the race, that the American race stands on his own, all right? And that's the American family. So America is not just a continent. Americans are a race of people that were replaced and given a new identity. Hence, everybody is hyphen American. We shouldn't be hyphen American anything. We are Americans, period. Facts over feelings. From the mouth of a few historical figures, Benjamin Franklin, observation concerning the increase of mankind. When you go to, there's a list that he, on the, a letter that he wrote, all right, on the increase of mankind. And when you go to number 24, what he says that, which leads me to to add one remark, that the number of purely white people, or so-called white people, because nobody's white, so-called white people in the world is proportionately very small. All of Africa is black or tawny. Asia, chiefly tawny. America, exclusive of the newcomers, are woolly so, meaning that the newcomers, the people who came in, all right, are woolly so, basically the same. And in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians, and Swedes are generally of what we call swarthy complexion. Even those people, the Spaniards, the Italians, the French, the Russians, the Swedes, they are also dark-skinned people who came here in the 1400s and waged war on our ancestors, all right? As also are the Germans. Now, you want proof of that? Didn't Putin release documents to show the original biblical people in Russia? So there's facts to verify everything that's in this book. The Saxons and only accepted with the English make the principal body of the white race on the face of the earth. All right. So guess who the majority is? Captain John Smith. When Captain John Smith came here into the Americas, particularly Virginia, and he met with the Powhatan, all right, King or Chief Powhatan, Pocahontas died. He described him, and let's look at the description. A true relation of such occurrences and accidents of happened in Virginia in 1608. A letter from Captain John Smith to Queen Anne in 1617. And mind you, Queen Anne was a woman of color. It is also proven in this book. I'm telling you, this is the book you just got to have in your collection over any other book. And that's just facts, right? The General History of Virginia, New England, and the Summer Isles, 1624, 2 days after Powhatan, having disguised himself in the most fearful manner he could, caused Captain Smith to be brought forth to a great house in the woods, and there upon a mat by the fire to be left alone. Not long after, from behind a mat that divided the house, was made the most dull, foolish noise he ever heard. That's Captain Smith, all right, they're referring to. Then Powhatan, okay, the chief or the king, it depends on, you know, what you want, how you want to look at it. More like what? A devil than a man, with some 200 more as black as whom? As himself, came unto him and told him now they were friends. So that's Chief Powhatan talking to Captain John Smith. And when he came in literally with 200 soldiers behind him, black as himself. But of course, we know that we are not black. They call brown people black. It's like today, right? Go around, ask our people what's their complexion. They'll tell you black, but obviously they're brown. You feel me? And that is from Captain John Smith, a letter that was written to Queen Anne in 1617. So we have documents to prove these things. So all these games that these people are playing, we don't have to indulge in none of that. We don't have to feed that type of energy. Let's just unite, step up, and come together and make this happen. That's all we got to do. All right. More proof again. Verrazano said in a letter in 1524, when he sent it to the King of France, they go completely naked, except that around their loins they wear skins of small animals like mittens, right, with a narrow belt of grass around the body, to which they tie various tails of other animals, which with which hang down to the knees. The rest of the body is bare, and so is the head. Some of them wear garlands of birds' feathers. They are dark in color, not unlike the Ethiopians, with thick black hair and not very long, tied back behind the head like a small tail. All right. Now, have you ever seen a pale-skinned Ethiopian? No. So why would they compare us to Ethiopians in complexion? Another letter from the king from Varazona to the king of France in 1524. So may I reiterate, we don't have to argue and debate people. We don't. The youth learned the following about these people. They are dark in color like the other tribes. Their skin is very glossy. They are of the medium height. Their faces are more clear cut. Their body and other limbs much more delicate and much less powerful, but they are more quick-witted. All right, they're fast. We fast, or we are athletic. You feel me? All right, I'm just saying, man. And of course, the PDF is in there, so you could check that out yourself. All right. The use of the term Negro. Let me see how long we've been on here. Give me 1 second, because I want to read for just about an hour. Hold up. 41 minutes. Okay, so we're on here for 41 minutes. All right, so we got another 19 minutes or so to read some more. Okay, we're just gonna do an hour. All right. The use of the Negro term. All right, Negro and black. Let's read. In 1854, the California State Supreme Court sought to bar all non-Caucasians from equal citizenship and civil rights. Let's read that again. That's in California. In 1854, the State Supreme Court of California, it sought to bar, in other words, prevent all non-Caucasians from equal citizenship and civil rights. Because remember, citizenship in the United States, it was a privilege. Citizen in the United States, because the United States became an entity by itself. It's like a boys' club, a society, and you had to be given an invitation to be part of that boys' club or that society. Okay? And many people were not a part of that, particularly us indigenous people, because we had our own systems, we had our own identity. But we wanted so much to be a part of that. That was the downfall, because it was being promoted. Okay? Just like how you see Hollywood is pushing this fantasy life and this fantasy identity, reality TV, and everybody want to be those things. But when they get in, they don't realize what it is. It's destruction. It's of the devil. All right? So that's the system we were pushing for. Opposed to being sovereign, opposed to being autonomous. We wanted the privileges that they were offering, something we had a whole lot more of, but we just couldn't see it because we wanted to keep up with the Joneses. Okay? So just have to kind of spend a little time on that just to kind of break that down. The court stated the word black may include all Negroes. It says may include all Negroes. It doesn't necessarily mean it included all Negroes. Now, that's the court making that determination. The word black may include all Negroes, but the term Negro does not include all black persons. So like I said, we were not Negroes, and we are not black either, but we were considered black. So the overall consensus was black. However, the term Negro was only designated to a few people. You have to read with understanding. We are of the opinion that the words white, Negro, mulatto, and black person, whenever they occur in our Constitution, must be taken in their generic sense. Not in a specific sense, but in a generic sense. That the words black person in the 14th section, all right, in the 14th section must be taken as contrary, distinguished from white, and necessarily include all races other than Caucasian. In the British slave colonies of North America along the Atlantic coast, many persons of African ancestry were at times classified what? As blacks. Negroes, mulattoes, or people of color. And these terms were, of course, used for the people of African ancestry. So let me ask you a question. Why would they call an American Indian black, Negro, or mulatto, or colored? So once again, there is proof and documentation. Let's go into the courts in California and pull those documents out. You see, we don't have to debate people, my brothers and sisters. We ain't got to do that. The facts is already there. The proof is already there. It's in the laws who the American Indians are. The purpose here is to illustrate how the term Negro has been applied to people of American descent. Explorations in the Ethnic Studies, Volume 7, Number 2, July 1984. The possibility that Native Americans were quite commonly called Negroes. You hear that? Is very much supported by the Portuguese usage. Why would they call a Negro meant negro? It meant a black person. Why would they call a Native American Negro? Go ask any of these Native Americans right there. Go ask them. Why did they call them Negroes? And let's go into this into these courts and pull these documents and shut everything down. During the colonial period, Brazil Indians were repeatedly referred to as what? Negroes. Negroes de what? Negroes de terra, the Negroes of the land. Like I tell people, man, I don't debate. That's why I don't debate. Because to me, it's a waste of energy. I'd rather spend my time building. I'd rather spend my time putting my people together and stepping up. That's where my head is at. I'm about action, not just about teaching and here to make you think and all of that. Now, that's not what I'm about. I'm giving you the information, process the information, but then what? We know who we are. What's next? That's where I'm at. I ain't got time for the games. I'm not a content creator, all right? I'm not monetizing my videos because I want our land back. I want our identity back. That's where the riches is at. That's where our wealth is at. Let's get that our birthright back. That's where the wealth is at. And that's what I'm focused on right now. The bigger picture, the end goal. I may or may not see it, but I promise you, I'm going to set the foundation. And I've already done that. We just got to step up. All right? Let us read some more. A great many examples from the 16th and the later centuries are cited by Judge Frederici in the analysis of Portuguese sources. These do not have to be repeated here, but to suffice to say that it was so common that finally in 1755 a royal decree had to be issued as follows. Among the regrettable practices which have resulted in the disparagement of the Indians, one prime abuse is the unjustifiable and scandalous practice of calling them what? Negroes. My brothers and sisters, it's documented. Let's look it up. Okay? In Judge Frederici, an analysis of the Portuguese sources in 1755. All we have to do is just pull up those things and authenticate it to be true, and the burden of proof is on them. Proof to us that document is not true. Proof to us that is not in the court of California. Proof to us that this document is not legitimate. You see, put the burden of proof on the people that's accusing us that we are not who we say we are. It was an unjustifiable and scandalous. Those words are very, come on, man. Those are powerful words right there. If somebody said that you are scandalous, that's some type of description for you, for your character. Okay? It was unjustifiable and scandalous practice of calling us Negroes. Perhaps by doing so, the intent was no other than to induce in them the belief that by their origins they had been disdained to be the slaves of whites. Okay, that's what they wanted us to think, and that's what was being promoted, as it is generally conceded to be in the case of blacks from the coast of Africa. You feel me? Could they just put us in that bracket? One or two Africans came, okay, and it wasn't no 12 million. It wasn't even a whole million that came into the Americas, period. And guess what? They did not come from Africa, directly from Africa. They came from Europe, because most of them was already in Europe, and they came to assist in the colonization. They did not come here as slaves. They came here as contracted workers. But when they came into the Americas, the rulers such as King James, King Charles, and the likes, okay, when their 7-year term was up, they did not free them as they promised. And that's when revolution started, okay? Because they were also enslaving the American Indians. Although some was walking around freely though. So let's put this history in its proper context. The directors will not permit henceforth that anybody may refer to an Indian as a Negro, nor that they themselves may use this epithet among themselves as it currently the case. By the later half of the 16th century, the English were referring to the people of Africa as Ethiopians, okay? As Ethiopians. Now, guess what? Varazona described the people in the Americas as the same complexion as Ethiopians. No matter how we look at it, I could shut any one of these naysayers down with documents and proof, okay? They were also called blackamoors, Negroes, and Moors, somewhat interchangeably. Negro gradually came to be the dominant term, especially after exhaustive contact with the Spaniard and the Portuguese. What the English meant by the term Negro when they first began to use it is not clear. Certainly, it was not then synonymous with a slave, as a great many persons so classified were free, both in England and in Virginia. You feel me? Let us proceed. Did it mean an African, a black person, or any dark-skinned individual? Today, the term is not widely employed in Britain, although the word black is used to refer to people of various skin colors from all of South Asia. Okay, you hear that? Of Asia and the Middle East, the West Indies, and Africa. They just generalize everybody and say, hey, you got brown skin, you black. Most Native Americans, if living in Britain today, would be what? Regarded as what? Black people. Why would they call a native that call themselves native in the Americas? If you go to England, they'll call you black because your ass is not the original people. Okay? Facts over feelings, especially if the ancestry were not known. Negro was also used in a general way in North American colonies. Some examples illustrate the use of Negro and black as applied to the people of American ancestry. And of course, the notes are there. All right. In 1619, let's talk about the so-called slavery that came from Africa and the Negroes and all that. Let us debunk that. In 1619, some 20 Negroes were brought into Virginia. At least 11 have names of Spaniards or probably Spanish characters. These fools were not from Africa. You feel me? Later, they were joined by Negroes and mulattoes with names such as Antonio, Several, and Several, which means many, and John Pedro. These Spanish-derived servants, you hear that? Servants and not slaves. They came as servants. Could well have been part of what American ancestry. However, no evidence is available except that they were largely secured from captured Spanish vessels. In 1670, the population of Virginia colony was said to be about 40,000, including 2,000 black slaves. Evidence indicates that there could not have been that many Africans there, and also that there were a great many American slaves or servants. So let me ask you a question. Who was all these so-called black slaves in Virginia if they were not Africans? Let us stop playing the games, man. Let's stop playing the games with these people. Thus, the total of blacks must have included a good many Americans. In 1698, 3 fugitive Negroes were reported in North Carolina, of whom one was American. Similarly, a list of Negroes imported into Virginia, 1710 to 1718, by a sea includes at least 69 Indians, right? So where did they come from? Like I told y'all before, all the people they're talking about that came on ships, they came from all over the Americas, because every country was considered a country individually. Virginia, California, all the islands in the Caribbean, all over America, each location, each territory was its own country. And once you travel by sea, you came on a ship. Don't let them fool you, man. Mostly from the Carolinas. So they took slaves from the Carolinas, Indians from the Carolinas, brought them in Virginia, called them black, and talking about the Africans. Yo, when you know, this is just so funny. It's funny, but at the same time, it's sad. Likewise, list of Negroes brought into New York from 1715 to 1736 include many slaves of probable or stated American ancestry from where? Campeche, Jamaica, Honduras, the Carolinas, and Virginia. They were taking American Indians, so-called black people, enslaving them and telling us we're from Africa. Man, stop. Listen, man, I'm already hyped. I don't want to get any more hype because people might think I'm screaming and I'm shouting and I'm vexed. No, I'm just passionate. Let's go. Virginia tax rolls and census records from the 1780s to the 1850s, right, have numerous examples of people of Indian tribal identity being classified as free people of color or as mulattoes. In fact, the practice was almost universal, not just here in the Americas. Some were also classified as FN, which means free Negro, or as B, which means black. Various records in certain countries, such as Southampton in 1830 and in parts of Delaware. You hear that? Certain counties, such as a county was literally almost a country, in parts of Delaware, virtually all free non-whites were categorized as FN, free Negroes, although enumerated under the free people of color column. These lists included people of Nantucket and other tribal groups. Under certain conditions, persons of African descent could be legally classified as members of an Indian tribe or an Indian. Why is that? Right? Until Walter Plecker said, nah, this is nonsense. We got some black people coming from Europe, some of them via Africa, but no, from Africa via Europe, or just the Europeans, period, and they're here passing as Indians. How can a Negro from Europe or Africa pass as an Indian if they don't look like the people? It's the same thing when Joseph went into Egypt and he was an Egyptian. You know what I'm saying? They couldn't tell the difference. Why is that? Because they were the same people. They had the same complexion. How could a so-called African slave or so-called European slave with so-called dark complexion or black be passed as an American Indian? That's the type of questions you have to ask these people that's trying to tell us this is not who we are. But once again, like I said, we don't have to debate or defend ourselves or prove anything to anybody. They know the truth. They know they were put in place to take our place. They know this because they're all part of the same ancestry. Asian, Caucasian is the same thing. A Caucasian is nothing but a Caucasian is the same thing. They're all Asians. Okay? They are co-Asians. Co means to be with. A co-pilot. All that stuff is broken down in the book. This is a must-have. You got to have that in your library. Educate our people. All right? An Indian, whether a full or half-blood, who has a female slave living with him as his wife, is head of the family and entitled to a reservation or land also. Let's read that again. An Indian, whether full or half-blooded, has a female slave living with him, okay, as his wife, is the head of the family, because we had a matriarchal system, and entitled to what? Reservation or of land also. So when our ancestors start marrying, whether it's a pale-skinned man or pale-skinned woman, they become part of the family. They get access to land. They have entitlement to those reservations as well. You feel me? So when you're trying to figure out how all this happened, it's all laid out in the book. Free blacks who have been admitted as members of the Creek Nation and are regarded as much by the tribe, if they had families, are entitled to reservation of land. During the Seminole Wars, a new term seems to have been coined, that of the Indian Negroes. One source, General Wiley Thompson, asserted in 1835 that they are descended from the Seminole and are connected by consanguinity, meaning that genealogically, okay, they are connected, all right, by blood, all right. They are American Indians. They were just coined Seminoles. You feel me? That term was created in 1835. For example, the jurist of South Carolina noted in 1852, it is not according to the use of the language in this region to speak of altogether black as a person of color. The phrase is almost exclusively applied to one of mix and color. A change took place in such states in Indiana in 1817, Kentucky, 1852, elsewhere, 1850s to the early 1900s, as the term Negro came to compass most persons of part African descent. Part African descent, meaning that the Africans who mixed in with our people. It never said we were from Africa. It said that mixed, African descent. You feel me? This change may not have affected people solely African and American descent, especially if the African ancestry predominated. Since many, but not all, Native Americans were brown or dark color without African ancestry. Their descendants, when mixed only with African blood, would very likely be seen as a Negro by most Europeans, especially in North America, where special terms for such persons such as Zambo, Grifo, Lobo, Confuso, Cabra, and Cabor never became current. In 1930s, a person of mixed Indian and Negro blood shall be returned as a Negro unless the Indian blood predominate and the status as an Indian is generally accepted in the community. And that's why they had to start taking away the whole blood quantum thing and now only do it on paper, which is the Dawes Rules and all these different things, because they could not prove that they were Indians by blood, because an Indian was a so-called dark-skinned, so-called black Negro person. So-called, all of the titles. Okay? So you could not be an Indian. So they had to switch it up and do it only on paper. Well, if you was on the Dawes Rules or you was on this and you on that in this paper to prove it, then you could be an Indian. That's why paper genocide, the pen is mightier than the sword. The pen is not mightier than the blood, but the pen is mightier than the sword. Facts over feelings. By 1940, all African American hybrids were to be counted as Negroes. Okay? Unless the Indian ancestry very definitely predominates and he is universally accepted as an Indian. Even pure blood Indians could be counted as what? Blacks, as in Nevada in 1980, when the census commemorator categorized 90 members of the Duckwater Shoshone tribe in that manner. You hear that? The pure blood Indians could be considered black. They were counted as black people in Nevada in 1890. My brothers and sisters, we're literally talking about a few hundred years ago, if so much. In the state of Delaware, more recent decades found that if a person said he was an Indian, he was recorded as either black or white, depending upon his appearance. Because that was when the hijack started taking over. Because we know Indians aren't white. In 1980, check this out, in the 1980 census was so arranged that any African American mixed blood who checked both black and Indian boxes was counted solely as black. Playing the games. The pen is mightier than the sword. In summary, it seems clear that many persons of Native American ancestry, in whole or part, have been or at times classified as Negroes or black. This is a matter of considerable significance for the scholars seeking to understand the actual ethnic or racial identity of non-white persons in North American British colonies and in the United States over the centuries. All right. Let me see how much time we got left. I hope I didn't pass the hour, but if I did, I'll have to stop right here. Let me see. Okay, yeah, I'm going to shut it down right here. All right, I'm going to shut it down right here. The next part we're going to read a little something from Chief, and then we're going to continue on to riddles of prehistoric times. Okay, we're going to get into that. Okay, boom, boom, boom. In fact, let's read a little something from Chief, and then we'll continue in the next video on the next section. All right, now this is me speaking. As I mentioned before, America was falsely deemed the New World in respect to her being a young continent. However, it was only a new world in the sense that it wasn't known on the grand scale to the people of the so-called Old World that existed on maps at that time. But make no mistake, the so-called powers there be in those days knew of America from since time immemorial. Be that as it may, it was not time for that side of the world now called America, the firstborn, to be exposed. A map in 450 BC did not identify America as a landmass. However, you will see Europe, Asia, and Libya. And I've shown you guys that map before. It is the Herodotus map, right? The world map, all right, in 450 BC. America was part of the earth, but not the world. I expound on that much later in the book. Does this mean America did not exist? Does it mean they had no idea of the American continent? Did Columbus really get lost? Did Columbus really think he had reached in there, thus calling the people Indians? So many unanswered questions, or are they? America was known to these so-called nobles and scholars, the higher ups of societies, so to speak, the literate, the haves opposed to the have-nots. They had the knowledge, trust me. Okay, I must first address the true size of the Americas before I go any further. America, the continent, is said to be larger than Asia and Africa put together by some scholars, but because of colonization and the fractionalization of lands, they made it much smaller than it actually is. Europe isn't that big. Okay, they made it that way. In fact, Europe is an island or lands sandwiched between what is now called Africa and Asia, borderline with the Americas. Europe isn't an organic continent. It was man-made. With that being said, they knew of America, but wasn't aware how far and wide the lands expanded at that time. So they divided the world into three parts: Europe, Libya, and Asia. In fact, they didn't even call it Africa at that time. They called it Libya, right? And Asia would be the land towards the east. The question remains, was the three parts excluding the Americas, or was it three parts with the Americas included, but just didn't know the extent of the Americas, like I said earlier? I would say a little of both, because there were a few explorers before Columbus that came into the Americas, and also trade was being done with various countries from the so-called New World and the Old. Long story short, Columbus wanted a piece of the pie. He heard about the spice and other trade that was done with the Indies at the time with China, Asia, and India. He had heard of the extreme land to the east, the Orient, and that he set sail traveling west. Columbus was no fool, and he knew exactly where the Indies were at that time. But he wanted a new territory or territories to make a name for himself. And so he decided to travel via the Occidentalis Oceanus route, a route that was not familiar by many other navigators. When Columbus got to the Orient, he saw people of God and in God and called them Indians. That is what most scholars have said. He had found the Orient, Asia Major, India Superior, the Americas. Therefore, we can look at America independently of what it is of what is currently called Asia, Africa, and Europe, or we can look at it as being in Asia, but as Asia Major or Asia or India Superior, the farthest east lands. Basically, the colonists flipped the maps and called west east and east west. If the colonizers deceived the world with their God, what wouldn't they do? 1492 was a portal that opened up. That era in that time was more of a spiritual nature than it was a physical one, meaning the enslavement was more of a spiritual nature opposed to a physical one. It was prophetic. So, as above, so is below. America was already enslaved before it was enslaved. More on that in details in the book. America was defined, America was definite robbed of her glory as being the old world and the most abundant in the lands. In fact, there was an article on January 10, 2011 as follows. Robert Kenzig of National Geographic is on Chris Boyd's Think Right Now discussing this article. Population 7 billion. He said he did the calculations and the entire world could fit in Texas if every person were allotted the same average square feet of living space as in New York City. Now, let's dive a little deeper into some more prehistoric times. In the next section, the author of the book, Riddles of Prehistoric Times, gives insights into America's people, their civilization, religion, etc., etc. By no means, the next section justifies the entirety of the American Aborigines in regards to religion, civilization, and culture, but he did share some. The author also makes mention of other tribes and clans in certain parts of the world. And of course, you have your notes. You could create your own notes in that section. And then you have Riddles of Prehistoric Times. All right, we'll get into that in another build with Chief and reading. All right. What it do, lineage. I'm about to conclude this build right now. Let me go ahead and give some shout outs. We have Empress Everlasting Water, what it is. Goddess was good. We have Madiha Crawford. All right. Respect. We have Red Rising on 9. We have Copper Draco. What it do? We have Chief Blackbird, White Tip. What's good? And who else do we have? I think that's all we have right now. For those of you who missed the live, man, listen, check the recording. I want to thank y'all for being a part of that. I'll be doing more reading, but the link for the book is in the description. You definitely, like I said, you want to have that book in your arsenal. All right. We have Cosmic God King, I think 84. What it do, lineage. You definitely want to have that book in your arsenal because all the proof, all the facts is in that book. So when people start talking all their nonsense, just make your notes because in the book, that's why there's space for notes. So you'll know, okay, you know what? On page such and such, I made such and such a note. Let me go and, bang them in the head with that. On page such and such, I got notes on that. Let me hit them upside the head with that. Okay? We're not playing these games no more. It is time to step up and let us not again defend who we are to anybody. Let's just present the facts and leave it alone. And then while we step up and do what we got to do as a unit, everything else will fall into place. It is really that simple. All right. So maybe later I'll do a part 3 in reading. Okay. So we're going to do a series of these videos, GENE-IN-SIS to Reevaluation. That I did part 1 yesterday. This is part 2. And it's basically, we just going to call it, let's do some reading. Point blank. Let's do some reading part 3, part 4, until we get to, enough information in the book. So you'll see the value of the book. All right. And this could be like a family thing, all right? When we get the family together around the wrong fire, do some candles if you ain't got a fireplace, whatever the case is, and read to the children, read to the family. Let them know. That's how we start teaching the truth, man, with facts and not opinions. And that's what we got to do. You dig? So when our children go into these indoctrinated schools, They have something else to combat that disease they're being taught, that misinformation that being taught. They're brainwashing our children. They're brainwashing our people. Let us deal with the facts. Let us deal with the law, not opinion, not people's feelings. You dig? And then we have, I think we have Layla Starr. Respect, respect, respect. We have Brandon Frederick. All right. Respect. I know y'all a little bit. I can't say you're late because you're right on time, right? But we're about to conclude. So go ahead and check the build, hit the replay button. All right. And check it out. Share the information. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, by all means, subscribe. My email is always in the link below. If you're looking to build with us, join us because we're making some serious moves. By all means, do so. I love y'all. Enjoy the rest of your 24. You may or may not get part 3 sometime later, but who knows? All right? Who knows? I love y'all. We'll talk soon.